Thanksgiving, that wonderful day of the year where millions of Americans join their families with the intent to stuff expressions of gratitude between copious servings of turkey and mashed potatoes. But if media tropes about the holiday are to be believed, everyone is just one or two rhetorical steps away from getting into a huge argument with that aunt who posts QAnon theories on Facebook, or that uncle who believes that trees should have legal standing to sue. I'm of course assuming that your uncle is former Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas, and that he's still incensed about being in the minority on the Sierra Club v. Morton decision when he isn't busy, being nearly 40 years dead. Regardless of the specifics, it's typically a given that Thanksgiving is ripe for political sniping, at least if the retinue of articles that are published around this time of year are to be believed. In 2018, the New York Times offered us a lesson on how to handle difficult conversations at Thanksgiving, CBS News offers to teach us how to diffuse tensions over political conversations, and The Atlantic in 2017 exhorted us to go ahead and talk about Thanksgiving. It certainly paints the picture that politics is a conversational landmine primed wherever families gather to give thanks. If you look at the coverage over the last couple of years, it definitely intimates that there is a qualitative difference about having these conversations during the Trump era. They suggest that it is much more difficult to talk about politics now, because passions are more likely to get inflamed, things are more likely to get riled up. I mean, shoot, USA Today openly came out and said, "Trump's in the White House, turkey's on the table, what to do if you don't want to talk about politics." But there's a bit of a selection issue going on here. Most reporters are interested in politics, and people who are interested in politics are likely to come from families that are also interested and talk about politics. Most families and people in America don't bother themselves with the daily dredge of the political scene, even now in a time that is, as we've often discussed on this channel, truly exceptional, to say the least. So is this reputation of Thanksgiving being the Mario Kart of holidays really earned? Does it really tend to cause that much friction, and has it really changed under the Trump presidency? So there are a few pieces of evidence that tentatively suggest yes. We know, for instance, that affective polarization is higher than it has ever been since we've been reliably measuring it. Affective polarization refers to the increasing gulf between feelings of in-group preference and out-group disdain, rather than increased distances in the policy preferences between the two groups, which has, in fact, stayed roughly the same over the last few decades. In short, both Republicans and Democrats are disliking each other more and more, often on the basis of perceived group, cultural, and moral differences, rather than differences in political preference. And there's reason to believe that these feelings have trickled down to familial relationships. In 1958, Gallup ran a poll asking people if they'd prefer their daughter marry someone of a particular political persuasion. 18% said that they prefer she marry a Democrat, 10% say a Republican, and a whopping 72% said that they didn't give a crap. Or, in at least as many words. By the time 2017 came around, political scientist Dr. Lynn Varick found that 72% had dropped to only 45%, and the vast preponderance of partisans preferred that their son or daughter marry someone in their own political group. So it's possible that if people are becoming less tolerant of their family members' politics, more sparks could be flying when people are getting ready to cut the turkey. It's even possible that President Trump has managed to have a direct effect himself. A 2018 article published in the journal Science used anonymized cell phone data to track how long people spent at Thanksgiving dinners in precincts of a different political persuasion than the one that they were coming from. The data looked at 2016, when Trump had just won the presidency, and people spent 30 to 50 minutes less time than they had the year before. This is totally consistent with the claim that political talk at Thanksgiving has gotten way more heated than before. But we need to put these findings in the context of the average American household. And when we do, the case that Thanksgiving is a political war zone, one exacerbated by the president, well, it doesn't hold up as strongly. Now, obviously, politics and political discussion is a source of contention for many families. There is a reason, after all, why these articles continue to pop up in the midst of the dopamine economy. They resonate with enough people to be able to get enough clicks, and if they resonate with enough people, that means that this has to be an experience that is dispersed enough that, it works. And there's no doubt that this presidency has caused unique stressors on families. I mean, shoot, there are articles written about how people are getting divorced because of this presidency. Although, honestly, I am a bit skeptical as to whether or not a direct line can be passed to the president on this. It kind of strikes me as one of those, Fortnite causes divorce kind of stories as well. I don't know. I need to see more data to be sure. Regardless, there is no denying that this is the reality for an appreciable number of Americans. But that appreciable number is definitely not the majority. Our first bit of evidence is that if you actually ask people, you find that not that many are expecting to get into a political fight at Thanksgiving. Only about 37% of Americans expect that general politics will cause a fight during the holiday season, according to a YouGov survey from 2019. Only 5% of people reported to be changing their plans in order to avoid political arguments, according to a HuffPo YouGov survey from last year. Most people weren't expecting a fight to happen, and among those that do, they're expecting that it'd be the result of long-standing family tensions. As Tolstoy wrote in Anna Karenina, all happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. There really isn't that much cause to get angry at the end of the day, or at least angry about politics during the holiday season, especially because only about 33% of Americans even expect to talk about politics there at all. Why? Because there's very little reason for people to talk about things that they already agree with. And unless you're like my father and I, who like to debate for the pure tea hell of it, and, also to annoy my siblings, wife, and mother, there's no reason to argue about things that you largely agree with anyways. Families tend to be increasingly politically homogenous. I mean, family has always been a strong predictor of one's partisan identity. In fact, it's usually been the strongest indicator of one's partisan identity, but that's been increasing. And people tend to be meeting their spouses, their friends, partners, what have you, in areas that are increasingly well sorted from a political perspective. When you add affective polarization in with this sorting, that's a pretty impregnable gatekeeper for, inter-party mixing nowadays. Dr. Ethan Hirsch and Yair Gitza used voter registration files from a variety of different states to estimate the proportion of individuals that are married to others that are outside their political party. What they found was that over 50% of people are married to someone of the same party. Otherwise, they're more likely to be married to someone who is a political independent. Only about 10% of people were married to someone of the completely opposite political persuasion. So when people are asked how they would feel if their son or daughter married someone of a totally different political party, that's usually just a hypothetical exercise. In fact, a 2017 study showed that for the college students they interviewed who went home for Thanksgiving, political talk actually made families feel closer, and that's because doing so reaffirmed that they were all on the same page, values speaking. Alright, but what about all the evidence that I've mentioned before? The increased gulf in affective polarization, the really cool cell phone data that showed people were spending less time now at Thanksgiving dinners because the president was sworn into office. Look, don't get me wrong, affective polarization is a huge issue, and the perceived divide between members of a different party is getting increasingly wide. But that's not manifesting as people locking horns in Thanksgiving dinner. It's actually manifesting as not inviting people of the different political persuasion over for Thanksgiving dinner, which is a issue, don't get me wrong, but it is a qualitatively different one. And this tracks with the data from the Trump traffic study too. While most people who visited a precinct of a different political bent spent less time there, 80% of people visited the precinct won by the same party as the one that they were coming from. So does this mean Thanksgiving is safe? No, definitely not by a long shot. Your family members might be more curious about your job and your partner than you'd like. Your cousin could come 3 hours late, having very obviously pre-gamed, and there's nothing stopping Grandpa from telling you just what he thinks about this whole OK Boomer thing that he's seen on television. Every family is defined in part by its drama. It just turns out that politics doesn't play that much of a role in it. I'm curious to see what you guys think about all this. Do y'all argue with your family about politics over Thanksgiving dinner? How similar are you and your family with regards to your politics? And do you feel that there has really been a shift in having these holiday conversations during the Trump era compared to before? I'm curious to see what you guys' thoughts about those, suggestions you might have for future topics, or other thoughts that cropped up while watching this video. I'm happy to see those down in the comments section below. I'm looking forward to reading all of them, answering a few in the next office hours. Special thanks to those supporting Progressive Politics on Patreon. I'd like to give a special shout out to Research Assistant Joel. Patrons get exclusive content, early content, and shoutouts, and if you'd like to be able to help, you can click the link down in the doobie-doo or at the end card at the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Last time we talked about why Mr. Beast was likely to actually break the 20 million tree mark, or, the $20 million mark for team trees before January 2020. As of recording, we are at about $16 million, which honestly isn't that much of an increase since I last talked about it. Oh, please don't make me a liar. Seriously, go over and donate if you haven't already, or if you can donate, please do go over to Team Trees. It's a wonderful cause, it's a fantastic cause, and as I mentioned before in the previous video, it's not going to solve climate change, but it's good to be able to do something towards tackling these sorts of problems. Although if you do and you decide to record yourself doing it, don't accidentally leave your email address in one of the frames. Well, that's actually the email address from the channel anyways, and a few of you actually have emailed me, since the channel's inception to say something or, what have you, and generally they've all been very pleasant. Now please, internet, don't change that pattern. I enjoy the frequency that they're at, and I enjoy how pleasant they are at the moment, but I'm just saying it's not the end of the world. Thank you for pointing it out and reaffirming the trouble with, you know, the last mile and just how serious it can be. I got some good support on the idea of talking about the collective action problem, so I've decided that I'm going to slate that video in for early 2020. So I got my book list going. I'm getting ready to dive back into the research on it. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad that you guys are interested in that topic as well. So let's make that a thing for 2020. Collective action problem 2020. I mean, it's as good of a campaign slogan as any. At least it's honest. Jonathan Barry asked if I thought that a approval voting system would be a good way to increase turnout, which reminds me, I also need to make that video on, you know, different voting systems, because that's also very interesting. Anyways, I honestly don't know how much a new voting system will be able to increase turnout. You know, that's kind of why I'm really interested in the data that's going to be coming out of Maine over the next few years, because they had just shifted their voting system recently, at least for, I want to say, anything below the federal level. It could be Congress, but I'd have to go double check on that. But cautiously, you know, I'm not too persuaded that a shift in voting system is going to necessarily raise turnout all that much, because the kinds of people who aren't turning out right now aren't going to want to affirm the current suite of candidates. It's going to take time for that, you know, classic Duvergerian pressure of, you know, pick just one of these two individuals rather than affirming the number of people you'd be okay with. It's going to take some time to kind of overcome the psychological things that have been inculcated over the last 200 years for that. So I think that's going to take some time. And I also think that the people who are currently not voting are doing so because they feel like that there isn't really a point to it. And I'm not sure that even expanding the suite of candidates is necessarily going to affect those concerns. So I think that it's possible that we would see an increase, especially due to advertising about it, trying to tell people, hey, get excited about this. This is a really cool thing. But I expect that effect will be, you know, up to maybe 5% at most. I'd be surprised if it went any higher than that, but it's definitely not going to take us from, you know, like a 60% voter eligible population turnout to like 90% or anything like that. I don't see anything as being that uniquely efficacious. That'll do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for your comments. I truly appreciate all of them that come in. You know, it's just great to have these kind of conversations, and I really appreciate it. Sources for everything, as always, be down in the doobly-doo, as well as links to Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys up there as well. If you enjoyed this video, hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by commenting down below, by sharing this video, and by subscribing to the channel. Stay in the loop for more awesome social science content as uploaded. You want to guarantee to be in the loop when I upload a new video? Be sure to click the bell icon as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.